Hi, welcome back to West Coast Geeks. I'm your host, Joaquin. How we doing, people? So today's video is talking about Greyhawk and D&D 5.5, 2024, or I like to refer to it pretty much as 6th edition and how they deal with Greyhawk. If you're going to play in the Greyhawk setting, while most of the maps you can use are fine, and even changing the leaders, they have a few more female leaders, which is okay, and um, they changed the timeline of the history, so Iuz hasn't conquered yet, and the Horn Society hasn't collapsed. So this opens up a lot of avenues, but the problem that I have with this new edition of 6th edition is trying to implement Forgotten Realms into Greyhawk. Like, each world should be different. Like, Greyhawk's its own world, Eberron's its own world, Dark Sun, I can't remember the name of the planet. Uh, it's its own world. Forgotten Realms has its own world. So if you want to play in these worlds, what makes them unique are the different species and rules. And, like, for instance, in Greyhawk, they have demi-humans, right? So, in the humanoids, where I shouldn't say demi-humans. I mean, most of them have demi-humans, but it's humanoids. And in 6th edition, now they have everything's Fey, and there's no such thing as humanoids. And they eliminated all the half races, which I think is pretty sad because it's like, what, there's no half elves? Okay, fine. You want to get rid of orcs? Um, you get rid of orcs. But to get rid of halflings and not halflings, I'm sorry, half elves, it just didn't really make that much sense to me. Also, too, having orcs and humanoids in Greyhawk is very important because um, my group is playing through against slave lords. And so, I thought they'd have it. The slave pits of the underworld, I thought they'd have this on the back, but they didn't. And so this was 1980, I believe. And so you're going into the it was like, cover my face or put to the side. So you're going into the city of Highport, and the landscape of, God, I can't think of it right now, the correct pronunciation of the Pomjor, but in 6th edition, they just pretty much have just, I almost want to feel like saying the term whitewashed it, but they got rid of the orcs. There's just bandits. There's no slave lords there, and I think that's a shame in the sense of, like, this is evil. Okay, so if you're ever wanted to play in a campaign where your characters are fighting evil, stopping slavery and slave lords is there. Now, I understand that maybe some players might be sensitive to that, and so as a DM, you're going to have to get to know your players. But overall, growing up and playing since the 1980s, when I was like 8 years old, um, and having different ethnic groups play along the way, I've never had any of my black friends or African Americans come up to me and be like, "Yeah, Joaquin, I'm not feeling the slavery or the slave lords are fighting them, or this makes me feel uncomfortable." And I figure that, or I'm pretty good at reading people most of the time. And so you could pick up on little subtle things, and I never got that. Now, that's not to say it didn't happen, or even during that time. I mean, during that time, most of the players were men, most of the players were white men, or white kids, or children, or teenagers, whatever. But that was a demographic, and it's still like that, I believe. Like, the majority are white people. But that's what I love about the game, because the game brings everybody together to kill orcs, damn it. And orcs aren't black people, right? And so I never bought into that. And you can show me so many other videos and token this or whoever. Um, but to get rid of orcs, to get rid of drow as being evil, it's like drow are the evil elves, and not all drows were evil. Only the majority of the drow who worship Loth. And even then, they still had, neutral, and I think even a neutral good patron for the Dark Elves. And I think the biggest mistake Gygax made in that is making the Dark Elves black. Just because the name Dark Elf. Actually, as I look back on that, I can see how stupid that was. And he's naive to cultural sensitivity. And so it would just be better if you would have called them the Dark Elves because they have darkness in their heart, that you should have just left them pale. And in fact, they would have been even really pale, choosing to spend their lives underground. Getting rid of the orcs was stupid. I want you to see my face on this video because I'm Mexican American. I'm like third generation, born in this country. And so you're like, okay, well, orcs are black people. That's bad. So we're getting rid of that. But you can play orcs now. But now, according to the player's handbook, they're just poor Mexicans, right? And the reason why I say that, because, their pants have holes in them. It's like, well, they're orcs. And I go, well, if you're saying that orcs are savages, are you saying that Mexicans are savages or Latino people are savages? Like, you can't have it both ways going into that, right? So that kind of like ticked me off to the point where I almost didn't go into 6th edition, but one artist, one single point of view, or one narrow-minded point of view as a company. But I've always enjoyed playing the game. This is our game. So the moment you buy this, regardless of what idiotic things that Wizards do next, it's your game. You can do whatever you want. And it's not to say that if you enjoy not having orcs evil or the drow evil, that's fine. But, that to me, that's like Forgotten Realm. Like, for Greyhawk, every world is different. So they're currently in playing A1. I gave them a choice of different adventures to go to, and I really wanted to play the Forgotten City. And they chose this route. So from N1 against the Reptile Cult, they made their way up to Safeton and then made their way down to Highport. And my friend Greg is going to be married soon, so congratulations to him. And he's thinking he wants to introduce his wife to D&D. In fact, we've been talking about that. So we're going to be putting this campaign on hold and these characters on hold. But the Secrets of the Stockade, is it Secret? Yeah, Secrets of the Slaver Stockade. The player characters, after going to Highport, realize that, this network of slavers is growing and that they have this base deep in the woods. And so the player characters are, in some cases, obligated to go and investigate it. And once they get there, they're going to go to the assault on the Erie. The assault on the Erie of the slave lords. And so in this adventure, they're actually going into the city. And this is a really tough adventure. And there are some aspects of these adventures that are railroaded. Because I asked my players, I was like, before I knew that we weren't going to have enough time to go through everything, that I go, do you want to play this hardcore mode, like as intended? Or do you just want to play normal mode? Because there are some situations where the player characters can be captured and there's almost nothing you can do about it. So they chose hardcore mode. And they avoided one of the situations. The other situation is in A3, where there's an opportunity to where if they find the slave lords, they're just going to be captured. There's not much they can do about it. Which brings us to In the Dungeons of the Slave Lord. I've always loved this art. I thought it was so cool. And they show a vampire in here, but I don't recall a vampire in A4. But in this adventure, this was so cool. So they get captured, and they are in a dungeon that's they're in a dungeon, they're interrogated, and then they're placed in a volcano, and as a sacrifice, and they're expected to die. But one of the characters is a monk, and even in like second edition, having a monk in your group going through here was that extra edge to help you from being captured or get escaping. Because while it explains in there they disrupted spellcasters, so if they were elves, they would go out of their way to like poke you with spears or hot poker or whatever. You don't want to get too descriptive on stuff like that nowadays. Even back then, when I played, I never tried to get that gory. Like, you see the slaves and they're on the rack and they're being tortured and you hear bone snaps. Like, you don't need that, man. Unless the majority of your group is into watching horror movies, um, I guess it's okay, especially if you're comfortable with it. But, like, for me, no. So, the Slave Lord series then, because this was like 80, and then they released a whole series in 81 of A2 through A4. Um, they then did a reprint, I want to say it's from 1986, The Scourge of the Slave Lords, where they combine everything. And what I enjoyed about this adventure was they go into more depth of the surrounding areas where the player characters are going to be exploring and making their way to Highport. The premise of the story is pretty weak, and if you want me to do a review on this, leave a comment below. And then they did the series, and I had to check the date on this. This was 2013, and this is Against the Slave Lords, and they included a starting adventure module for 1 through 3 or 0 through 3, because these modules were recommended to go into like mid-level, but if you're going to be playing 6th edition characters, I would suggest first level, because even though my group is somewhat having a hard time in A1, they're in the dungeon level. It's only because they didn't take a short rest, and they got a little bit overconfident, and they kept battling through orcs and other creatures, and then they ran into a den where there was like 4 orcs, an ogre, an orc chieftain, which has like 90 something hit points, and then an orc shaman who came down and was dropping spiritual hammer. So they barely survived that encounter, which was fun because I thought they were all going to get killed or knocked out, and then I was going to have them captured, and then they were going to figure a way out. And that's what's nice about this adventure, because it helps the DM learn about if your player characters get captured, then they will give you scenarios on how they can escape, because they want you to escape, because they want you to keep going through the adventure. Because this adventure is not only about like fighting against the slave lords, disrupting their plans, but it's survival. And can your characters make it through? Especially the last part where they're stripped of everything and have to find new gear, and then eventually meet up with the slave lords. So with that, people, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you do, leave a comment below. Have you played through this series? Would you like to play through this series? Do you think your group could handle it? One of our players who is no longer with the group, I was talking to Greg, and I asked him, I go, because I don't want to throw this person, say his name, but I go, do you think he'd be able to would be okay with this? And he was like, probably not, because he'd be questioning everything, and maybe to the point of like, why are we playing this adventure, even though the group voted on it, type of thing. And so, in that type of situation, because he would feel so strongly about something like this, I would probably shelf it and explain to the other two that either he's not part of the group or we move on to a different adventure. And I know my group, we would just shelf this for another time. So with that, people, I hope you guys are having a good day, and I will catch you later.